Today on LA Currents, they are the voice of the Asian Pacific American community, providing legal and educational assistance to more than 15,000 individuals and organizations every year. Next, did you know that you can pay your water bill from the 311 mobile app? That graffiti removal and pothole repairs are just a convenient tap away. The City of LA is listening and making a difference. First, she is the 2021 LA Poet Laureate. Lynn Thompson is a former litigator and award-winning author with the power of words to unite communities. We talk with Lynn about the literary arts and the intersection she created between poetry and politics. As an oral art form, it actually predates the written word, poetry. But keeping poetry alive and celebrating it in these modern times, I'm delighted to be joined today by the Los Angeles Poet Laureate, Lynn Thompson. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. The responsibility of the Poet Laureate is to be a literary ambassador for the city and beyond, to represent Los Angeles and the myriad wonderful, wonderful poets that we have here. And take that out to the world and share it as broadly as possible. Try to get it into communities that might not otherwise have access to it or think they have access to it, from elementary schools to senior facilities. One of my predecessors, Luis Rodriguez, took poetry into the prisons, really to try to get it out in the world.
You kind of came into poetry sideways or on the slant?
Yes.
I love that, on
yes.
the slant. I know your father loved poetry, and I know that you said that you've been influenced by Pablo Neruda, Edward Hoagland, Jane Cortez, a whole litany of poets. But how did you end up falling in love with poetry and deciding you should be one?
Well, it was a long process. My father was a lover of poetry and read poetry to me as a child. And actually, my sister-in-law found one of my earliest poems that I wrote for her and my brother when they married, and I was about 10. So clearly I had been scribbling for a long time. But then I went to law school and poetry went by the wayside. And I remember going into a bookstore and picking up a book of Pablo Neruda's 20 Love Songs and a Song of Despair and thinking, I'll have what he's having. This is fantastic, right? And I really felt that what I needed in my life was poetry. So I stopped practicing, went to work at UCLA where I was able to use my legal background, but really committed myself to writing poetry.
I'm sorry, you stopped practicing. These didn't cross over.
They did not cross over.
That is a very brave move.
Some of my friends and family said it was a foolish move, but I got a really good job at UCLA. I was the director of their Employee and Labor Relations Office, so it wasn't like I just kind of tiptoed through the tulips. I was still responsible, still paying the bills, etc., but I wanted to do this in a serious way, and I didn't feel that I could do that if I was practicing law, if I was a litigator.
So did you actually take poetry classes or literature classes, or did you sit down and read and read and read and read and read? I mean, how does one actually make a move into becoming a poet?
All of the above. I went to every workshop I could find, and we're lucky here in Los Angeles. Everybody wants to come to LA, right? Mm-hmm. So we would get wonderful writers here, from W.S. Merwin to Yusef Komunyakaa, wonderful writers that would come to California and Los Angeles specifically because it's a great place to come. And they would give workshops and they would give readings, and I attended every single one that I could. I subscribed to as many literary journals as I could afford, got out into the community, met a lot of people who were very welcoming and supportive, and basically did everything I could outside of the academy to become learned about poetry.
Poetry, obviously, take it away from its academic, where we have to learn when we're in school, etc. Is it a vibrant world just in the world? Because it seems to me that it almost has almost a niche, precious component to it.
It has that, but it is also very much celebrated across the world. The great thing, if there's anything that has come out of, I won't use the word great, that's overstating it in terms of the pandemic. But what the pandemic led to was that the poetry readings that had been scheduled, people that were ready to launch their books and suddenly were shut down at home, all ended up on Zoom or some form of Zoom.
Right.
And we were drawing as a community poets from all over the world because all you had to do was log on. The poetry tradition is a strong one. And I always tell people who question it, I said, you can question it as part of your everyday life, but let someone get married, have a baby, graduate, a death, a tragedy like 9/11, who do they turn to? They want the poets. They want us to put language around the unsayable.
Poems are at once extremely personal, but sometimes they feel inaccessible because they can be complex, or there's a lot of meaning wrapped around something, and the reader at the time is supposed to understand that or figure it out for themselves. So how do you, when you're hoping that people will feel like poetry is something for everyone, how do you say, no, don't worry about that, this is what you need to focus on?
Yeah, I think everybody comes to poetry. It may not feel like a natural language, but if you listen to kids, they're rhyming, they're making up little verses as they play their games. Language is something to play with. Some people play it hard, man, and it's inexplicable. It'd be like if I tried to play basketball, the moves and I don't get it. I like to watch it, but I can't do it. But I would say there's so much poetry accessible now on the internet, on podcasts, on a variety of platforms that people can go in and pick and choose. A lot of magazines, the Atlantic Monthly, will have maybe one or two poems. Some of them you're going to get and they're going to resonate. Don't worry if they don't, there'll be another one that does.
I mean, it feels as if there's an appreciation that is growing as time passes.
I do think we are living in a very strong age for the love of poetry. You know, everything has a season, as the book of Ecclesiastes says, and I think we're living in a very, very strong season for that. It has been for a while, maybe the last 15 years or so, it seems to have had a renaissance. And then this young woman named Amanda Gorman came along. And what she has done for poetry, her poise, and just the power of her delivery at the inauguration, I think has upped the stakes even more, because everyone, of course, is saying, who is that young woman? How fabulous was she? I could not do at 22 I couldn't find the bathroom at 22. So I just thought she was amazing. And of course, she's a Los Angeles product, so we're very proud of her. Okay, Lynn, don't forget, you're a poet. Carve out some time to work on what got you here. You can't help but feel immensely honored and proud of doing it, and for me, a little vindicated. For those who said, you know, you're a lawyer. And I said, why do I have to be one thing? Why can't I be, I've done that for almost 15 years. No, I think I want to do something else. So I do feel vindicated for people who think, how do you even get there? You figure it out, what works for you to get you to your best creative self. It won't be easy necessarily, it certainly won't be a straight path, but you can do it. But you have to be committed to it. If you decide you want to be a farmer today, and 10 years from today you say, I really should have gone to Wall Street in the first place, or vice versa, you can do that. Some people will tell you, that's a ridiculous leap, why would you do it, what about this, what about that? If it's what you want, make sure it's what you want. Sometimes you're not completely sure, but you take a little bit of a leap of faith, try to put as much security around yourself as you can, but no, at some point you're out there on a ledge, and people are going to look and say, I told you it was a dumb thing to do. No, take that chance to live your fullest life, which is never being one thing. There are some mornings I wake up and say, I'm a poet laureate.
You are.
Get out of town.
You can't deny that
I
ever
can't
again.
deny that ever again. I have a project in mind that I'm not quite ready to talk about, but that I hope to be able to work with middle school and high schoolers on in applying the principles of poetry to what is unique about Los Angeles. Ooh. So it's something that I'm trying to flush out in terms of civic memory, how we view the city, particularly timely, I think, as we hopefully are coming out of this pandemic a little bit, but know that we're coming back to a city that's been ravaged by it.
All right, well then you have to keep us posted on all of this.
I plan to. Thank you so much.
All right, it was really a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Paul Chan is the chairman of the Civil Rights Organization for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, Advancing Justice, Los Angeles. We talk with Paul about their years of positive influence and the critical issues they currently face.
We live in a richly diverse country where different cultures coexist. Unfortunately, fear and hatred can sometimes jeopardize that harmony. With the current pandemic, there has been a rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans, which has highlighted the importance of the efforts organizations like Asian Americans Advancing Justice Los Angeles are doing to create a more equitable and harmonious society. With us today, we have Paul S. Chan, who is the chair of the board of directors of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Los Angeles. Thank you so much for being here, Paul.
Hi, Natalia. Thank you for having me.
So how has the global pandemic impacted the efforts of the organization?
There has been a significant rise in anti-Asian discrimination, anti-Asian harassment that's coincided with the onset of the pandemic. And, you know, the reasons for that are many. You know, the political rhetoric of the last administration, you know, referring to the Kung flu, referring to the China virus, certainly created an environment where this sort of conduct, you know, is more prevalent. But I think, you know, just sort of the stresses brought on by the pandemic itself, you know, has caused, unfortunately, you know, some folks in the community to think of people from China or Chinese Americans in particular as you know, having the virus or somehow being responsible for the virus. So one of the top priorities of our organization now is dealing with this rise in anti-Asian discrimination. So we do have a program dedicated, you know, directly to trying to identify and report, you know, instances of discrimination and harassment or violence, and provide redress, you know, directly to victims. So we have folks who, as I said, you know, are manning the phones in a lot of different languages and are available, you know, for intake for people who might be, who might have experienced, you know, anti-Asian violence themselves, and can try and direct them, you know, to the assistance they need.
Literally a week ago, I was in the subway with a friend of mine, and I experienced something that was just so shocking that I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
This Asian woman was in the same train as myself. We boarded it at the same time. And then these two men started, you know, saying some really nasty words and intimidating this poor woman. And it was just horrible to experience that as a human being, and also to see that there was no one else doing nothing. And I remember looking at this woman and seeing her shaking and crying in fear. And my friend and I were like, we cannot, like, it's just, it's like a human responsibility that we have to act. And obviously I have no idea how those two men are going to react towards me, but at that moment it's like there's a woman in distress that did nothing to generate this behavior. So I guess I'm so happy to hear that you're, you know, doing something to educate people like myself who experience this.
It's shocking. And,
it is. It's just,
you know, it happens when you least expect it. But it sounds like you did the right thing, and that's why, you know, training like this is important, because it's not always a case that, you know, necessarily you need to intervene and confront the people doing it. You don't want to put yourself, you know, in harm's way or make the situation worse. But there are things you can do, as you did, to try and assist, you know, the victim, get them out of harm's way, you know, document the conduct, report it, you know, after the fact, so that folks know what happened.
So now that we're all still staying at home and we have access to books, documentaries, films, TV shows, online courses. What do you personally recommend that we look at or pay attention to again in this, continue this progress of gaining knowledge?
Sure. Yeah, while we're all cooped up, now is the perfect time to try and do some streaming and look to see what's available. There was a fantastic documentary called Asian Americans that was recently broadcast on PBS. I think it's now available for streaming on Apple and some other platforms, in which our founder, our original founder, Stuart Quo, was actually a consultant. And it really told the story, the historical story of Asian Americans in this country. And so I would highly recommend that. But, it doesn't all have to be sort of, tough learning or it can be lighthearted as well. I mean, there are shows that portray sort of, the Asian American experience in different contexts, in different cities, and in comedies in a more lighthearted setting, but, that bring in elements of what we're talking about. So, the show called Kim's Convenience on Netflix.
I think I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah, Fresh Off the Boat on network TV. Those are comedies, but, those do bring insight into, different Asian American experiences that I don't think you saw on TV, 10 years ago. And so, that can be something that you can tune into. I think one of the Oscar-nominated movies this year, Minari, is fantastic. That's again a very different Asian American experience. Sort of a Korean American experience. But that's just a good movie. But I would recommend that as well if you wanted to get some insight into it. So there's a number of things you could tune into, and it doesn't all have to be like homework.
And speaking of stories, I mean, I love watching films and fictional stories, but you have the real stories. Which are your favorite stories that you've experienced in the organization?
A case involving 72 Thai garment workers who were being held in a sweatshop in actual slave labor conditions here in El Monte. And they were held, they were forced to work in the sweatshop, manufacturing garments for manufacturers, retailers that we would all know. And so we got involved in the case with the organization, helped free the workers, helped them obtain some legal status, and then actually were involved in the lawsuits that were brought against not just the sweatshop operators, but also the manufacturers and the retailers of the clothing that was being sold. And so, we were able to help the organization obtain, a very successful settlement to help, the garment workers. And then we just sort of continued our relationship with the organization since then.
So in terms of looking at the future, where do you hope things will be at in, say, 5 years?
Well, obviously we hope we won't need as much of this focus on anti-Asian discrimination, but I think we will continue to have that as one of the core programs. I think the hope is that we continue to get the word out, that we are here as a resource, and that we are available to assist communities locally as well as nationally. Because one of the challenges is not so much having the capacity to provide services, but getting the word out, educating the community that we are here and educating the community about what we can do. With every year we have new members of the community who arrive, from different countries, who speak different languages. We were chatting earlier that, one of the challenges of the organization is that the Asian American community is so diverse. It is not confined to Chinatown. It is not confined to Koreatown or Japanese Americans or Korean Americans. There's probably upwards of 40 different countries and languages, within our constituency that need to be serviced. And so I think our hope is that word continues to get out, that the organization is here and available to assist within this broader and more diverse group that we call the Asian American community.
So I guess to wrap it up, how can allies and members of the AAPI community connect with Asian Americans Advancing Justice Los Angeles?
Sure. Well, I think main things to do are to publicize your allyship, get the word out about what Advancing Justice is doing. As we saw last summer with the BLM movement, You really do need sort of community support. You need to galvanize the broader community. And I would encourage folks to go to our website, advancingjustice-la.org, which has tremendous information about what we do and how you can get involved to support the organization.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, Paul.
Donna Archea is the director of LA's 311 call center. We chat with her about the success of the 311 mobile app and how it is connecting people to the city of Los Angeles. Imagine being able to access all the services and all the information for the city of LA in the palm of your hand. We don't have to imagine because it actually exists. My LA 311. And here to tell us all about it, I'm delighted to be joined by the director, Donna Archea. What is My LA 311?
Well, My LA 311 is actually a group of services. It includes the 311 call center, which you can reach by dialing a 3-digit number, 311, just like you call the police department by dialing 911. So it's easy and simple to remember. And it also includes the My LA 311 mobile app, which is available for free on the various app stores. And the idea of the app is to allow people, when they're out in public spaces and they see a problem like a pothole or a cracked sidewalk or a street light that's not working, it'll go straight to a crew and somebody will come out and take care of it.
It's an enormous scope of what is available, but let's go ahead and talk about what are the ones that are the most common.
The most common services for 311 is service request intake of things like dumping, potholes, reporting graffiti. Bulky item pickup appointments is a very popular service for sanitation customers. Reporting homeless encampments, things like that. Park maintenance, animal services, and a variety of other services are available through the app or by calling 311.
This is not important, but it just made me think. It's the fact that you're getting calls from around the world. What's the most unusual thing you can remember somebody called to ask you about? Was it weather related, or was it, where should I stay in a hotel? Or
well, we've actually had calls of people asking about, I'm coming to Los Angeles and I know somewhere there by City Hall there's a very well-known place to get a really good sandwich.
Oh, cool.
And do you know the name of that place? And I might ask the people on the floor, who knows a good place? Philippe's, okay. So we get odd questions like that.
The city of Los Angeles, 4 million plus humans, and all of these services changes minute by minute. I mean, as we've been sitting here, I am sure 19,000 decisions have been made and a whole bunch of adjustments have been taken. So how often is the site updated?
Well, our 311 team is partly responsible for ensuring that the information is accurate, and we work with contacts in all the city's 40 different departments to see that that happens, because they're the subject matter experts. If an error is brought to our attention or we find one when we're trying to assist a customer, we can actually click a button that says there's something wrong with this information and put a comment in. That will get sent directly to the department editor who's responsible so that they can update it. And of course, we do get calls about new things all the time that aren't yet in the system because there was a press release last night or something like that. So we try to keep up to date on those things too. And when it is something that needs to be added to the system, we reach out also to those departments to add new information for new services.
Why was it put together in the first place? It's got a pretty cool history.
Mm-hmm. Well, the 311 call center was the first thing that was put in place, and that was back in 2002, to give the public an easy way to reach the city and learn about city services and access it. I think they had done some kind of a study years ago that said the average person got transferred around to like 4 or 5 different departments before they got to the right place, because it can be very complicated to know who to call. And so with 311 coming along, we were able to triage, talk to the customers, find out more about what they were looking for, and then we could help them get to the specific place if we couldn't even answer the question ourselves.
There are things, however, that 311 should not necessarily be the first route that you take. So what are some of the arenas that, I mean, it's a little like, you know, if this is an emergency, call 911. So what are the things that people should immediately not use 311, but immediately use 911?
Well, anything life-threatening emergency.
Okay.
So if someone's being attacked by a stray animal, or if you are just witnessed a car accident or something like that, you don't want to call 311. And if you do, we're going to transfer you right away to the police department. So those life-threatening emergencies that need immediate attention, go ahead and call 911. And typically, I would say for things that are police business, crime reports and things like that, and information about someone, a suspect or whatever, you want to tip. You provide a tip or something, but those types of things should go directly to the police department. There's probably also some things that you would go directly to LADWP, the Department of Water and Power, for your utility bill, because 311 can't really help you with that. But even if you do call 311, we offer on our front end a couple of options for those departments that we don't add a lot of value for you, so that you'll get directly there instead of waiting for us. And then we have to transfer you over there. So I would say primarily police department and DWP would be the two, but anything non-emergency or any kind of general information, call 311.
But there is an interesting relationship with LADWP. I mean, if you have an LADWP online account, that can automatically be your account for the MyLA 311, and you can pay your bill as well, correct?
That's right. If you register your MyLA 311 and let them know that you have a DWP online account, it will link those two accounts so that you can actually access a few services on the MyLA 311 app that only paying residential sanitation service customers can use, such as that bulky item pickup. If you are a residential customer paying sanitation services, you can get as many of those bulky item pickups if you want. You can report one every week. If you have an old couch, if you have some old electronics, if you have an old mattress, put it out there by the curb on your regular trash day and make this appointment, and they'll come and pick it up.
That's a godsend, because sometimes trying to get rid of that huge stuff that you can't do it. I mean, no one wants to pick it up or take it because it's not actually something that can be recycled or used by another nonprofit organization.
That's right.
All right, so then makes me think, is there a limit to how many requests you can put in through 311? I mean, is there any kind of, you know, oh my gosh, there's Maria again.
No, there's really no limit. In fact, some customers, when they're out in the evening walking the dog or whatever, they'll be jotting down several locations of different problems, and then they'll call us up on the phone and report 10 different things at once. So, you know, whatever works for the customer, we're here to assist them.
So along those lines, people obviously are concerned about their privacy. You know, we have put a lot of our information out there on a number of accounts and sites and apps, etc. So what are the protections that one can feel confident in if they do in fact, you know, get the MyLA 311 app or they register online? What are some of the safeguards?
Well, most of the service request types can be submitted anonymously.
Okay.
You don't have to provide your contact information for most of them. You don't have to provide your email or your name. The information that's in the MyLA 311 system in many cases gets requested as part of public records request, but any personal information such as names and contact information is redacted.
So the person that's reporting the barking dog is not going to be subject to the person who owns the barking dog knowing that they did it.
That's right.
I really appreciate all of this information, Donna, and I really enjoyed our chat.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share about 311. I think it's a great community service, and everybody should use it.
I agree.